what I really love about blockchain. It's all about track history and understanding what they are.
Brian Syring, marketing team lead at PAW.
With the blockchain, it's all there for information. You can post it up and be like, hey, this is where your money's going. This is the wallet it was sent to. This is how it's going to be spent. There's those layers of being able to see what it's getting invested in, being able to track where the progress is of this development.
And are they being accountable?
Yes. Are they being held accountable? Are they living up to what they said they were going to do? With blockchain, you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to track them and be like, hey, you guys said you were going to spend money on this. That didn't go there. What's going on here? You'll be held accountable. And I think that's where it comes down to, is that accountability that just simply doesn't exist currently.
How you see blockchain influencing scientific development.
As a scientist, it can be very difficult to, accrue funding and get the money needed to go out and do these experiments, run these tests that you need to do this research, right? So if you can use blockchain like those RWAs to be able to raise funds, think about it as a way of fundraising. Currently you got to petition governments or entities to be able to get this money. If you can do that decentralized, imagine rallying a big group of people who have an affliction to a certain disease. You can gather them around and they can use blockchain, they can use DeFi to be able to help fund this research, this project for these scientists, that it's not the government making this decision, it's the people who are actually afflicted. I think that's going to, that has some serious potential in the future.
Bonded by Science, proudly presented by Noble Blocks.
All right, Brian, thank you so much for joining us on Bonded by Science. And you're coming to us from PawChain. And I'm very much looking forward to diving into many topics with you. So welcome to Bonded by Science.
Thank you so much for having me, Shellie. Couldn't be happier to be here. Very excited to talk about PawChain, talk about how it relates to the field of science and blockchain technology, what it's going to do for the future of science and, data transfer as a whole. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I was wanted to have this interview with you was because I know there's a lot of researchers that I've worked with in the past, and there's still a lot of scientists out there that are very unfamiliar with blockchain. They are very unfamiliar with the terms like cryptocurrency, and I wanted to make sure that they at least had a chance to tune in and to get a better insight into what the technology is able to offer and why they are not too late to get into the space, either as a personal or as an academic or as an entrepreneur.
Well, I think it's still extremely early in the development of blockchain. And I think a lot of time it gets pigeonholed by cryptocurrency because that's what gets the news coverage. Bitcoin doing what it's doing, Ethereum doing what it's doing. You hear about meme coins. It's all about money, right? It's all about financial assets and gains and this and that. But blockchain is so much more that people don't realize. Is all the blockchain does is send data up and down the chain, but it's faster, safer, and cheaper than current centralized options. At PawChain, that's like what we're focused on. We're focused on the actual blockchain technology, not necessarily the cryptocurrency, but how these other fields can use that technology, like the medical field, the educational fields, anywhere that needs data sent can utilize these technologies. And I think scientists, I think many people, many fields can benefit from this emerging technology because it's really only 14 to 15 years old. It's still extremely early. The world, about 94% of the world isn't involved in blockchain or cryptocurrency. And we're just now starting to see big institutions, governments just now coming in with ETFs, with El Salvador, some smaller countries making investments, strategic reserves. The United States has also talked about making a Bitcoin natural reserve. So it's still extremely early and growing. And I think the benefits are always going to be there as the technology improves. And that's exactly what we're focusing on here at PawChain.
Yeah, there's a lot of silos that you brought up there. Like one was like, having Bitcoin as a reserve. That's a whole other like political economic silo, and then you talked about the blockchain as a technology and what it can offer. And then you have the El Salvador, which was like, that is a huge N=1 experiment, which I think a lot of people are having their eyes on. So that's basically where they adopted Bitcoin as a primary currency for a transaction. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's what El Salvador did. There's going to be more smaller countries that I believe are going to be doing the same thing to get away to hedge against inflation, because we all know the current fiat system, the U.S. dollar, is pegged, against inflation. So the Fed, other governments print this money, and your assets, your money that you make that's just sitting in a bank, if you're not earning certain percentages, you are actually losing money. And that's kind of like the way I explain to family, to friends who are getting into Bitcoin, to cryptocurrency, to blockchain in general. Like, this is a hedge against that inflation, against the printing of money. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of SEC regulations, some blowback. The central banks are extremely powerful. So they're trying to get their hand in the cookie jar to hedge against it themselves, because they kind of know where this is coming. You can see it slowly adopting over the last 14, 15 years, that governments, other people are wanting to get exposure to this. And it's so very young, and you are still extremely early. It's in my belief that I think 5 to 10 years from now, we'll go from 5 to 6% adoption up to 15 to 20% adoption. And just imagine what it's going to look like then, what the price of Bitcoin will be then, Ethereum will be then, but not so much, like I mentioned earlier, the cryptocurrencies, but that technology. There's certain states already using the technology to store driving records. Like California, I believe, is using the AVAX blockchain to store driving records on the blockchain. I think that's only going to increase, as the field keeps growing and we start getting more validity. And as governments come aboard too, we need that regulation certainty, and I think that's coming. Most people in DeFi don't want to hear regulation; they don't want it, but we need it to gain some of that adoption, to get people to trust this and not just think that it's just a casino, the meme coin casino.
That's the big question mark, right? Like the trust. So blockchain also, in its core, one of its core features is to address trust or distrust between parties. And I'm sure we'll unpack that soon. But the other part is just like the media has had a huge role in the narrative around blockchain, and by association, cryptocurrency. So it's mostly been focusing on crypto. And then the association is actually, it's in the other direction. Then blockchain gets sucked into that. You've been in the field for many years now. So how have you seen the media coverage? And do you think that the media coverage has been fair?
In the past, I don't believe so. Has it shifted? Yes, it has, because now these big institutions with sway and power, with lobbyists and money, they're starting to influence a little bit of this media, saying, "Hey, that we got to let up on this. Like, this isn't going anywhere." I think at the beginning they tried to ignore it, that this is just a fad. This ain't going to be a thing. This is just somebody playing with money on this new kind of technology. But over the course of the last 5 years, especially, you've seen that every time there's a bull run, every 4 years, the market runs in cycles. Like, it just keeps getting stronger and stronger and more adoption. I think we're at that point now where they cannot ignore it anymore. So they're deciding to invest and adopt it, and the media is slowly following. I also think that the blockchain technology currently, especially in the past, wasn't good enough to facilitate the needs of these Web2 businesses, of these companies. It just didn't make enough financial sense. When you talk to a Web2 business, why don't they use blockchain? Simply because they cannot make money. That's what it comes down to. Can they make money? And the way things currently are constructed, with everything being splintered, hundreds of different blockchains that don't communicate properly with one another, that's kind of a problem. It's just too difficult.
Yeah, when you say Web 2, maybe we should just iterate. What's Web 1, what's Web 2, and then what's Web 3?
Okay, so Web 1 is like the internet, the creation of the internet, the first iteration of the internet. Web 2 is usually considered like the social media transformation of the internet, the
Where
Facebooks,
you can interact.
the X's, where you can interact, yes,
Yeah.
back and forth. Web3 is blockchain, like, this technology, the third iteration of the internet. And then like Web4 is like AI. What's that going to look like when
Maybe.
AI gets a
Yeah.
hold of exactly, like that's still
Maybe.
yet to be established. I mean, as we grow,
There's still a lot of hype around AI. I'm not completely surfing that wave yet.
there is. I think there's way too much hype around the AI. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think 5 years from now we'll have a big influence on the space, on the internet as a whole. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we need to focus on the Web3 and get this blockchain stuff done right before we move on.
But if we were to say Web3 is blockchain, that to
Yes.
like the average, 18-year-old, for example, or even someone that's 25, 35, 45, 55,
Yeah.
they would be like, so Web 1 is you read. You get to read everything on the internet, basically. And Web 2 was the transformation that you could interact. So you could do banking. You could leave a comment on someone's picture. Like you got to interact. But Web 3, when we say blockchain, what is the action? What do I get as the user then for Web 3?
So what you get out of the user with the blockchain is just the way data is transferred. Currently data is transferred through a central source and then distributed out. With blockchain, it's more decentralized. There's nodes, there's different ledgers, there's things that control this, that give the power away from those central institutions that usually control everything, like, the Googles, the FANGs of the world, the central banks of the world. But Web3 is a shift more to decentralization, to the people kind of having the power, similar to Web2 with like social media, how you can have influence now. Anybody can have influence now. You don't need to be a powerful person, but you can create a YouTube account and create a platform on X and gain an extreme amount of influence. Look at some of the big influencers in Hollywood, like what they build, and they're paid millions of dollars to advertise, handbags, all these different. It changed everything. It changed marketing, and I think that's what's going to happen with Web3 and blockchain. Is it's going to change who has control of that data.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think when you talked about Web3 and I was thinking about the user, I was like, okay, so Google, let's just use Google because everybody knows Google. So they're centralized. So they can decide essentially what to filter out. They can decide based on advertising what to show you first. So they take the decision away from you. But when we're talking blockchain and when we say decentralized, how might that experience differ now for the individual user compared to like a Google centralized? What do we get?
Okay, so with the centralized is obviously they're dictating the decisions. They control the money. They come in like Google, all these companies, guys. Facebook isn't just a social media platform. Google is not just a search engine. They make billions of dollars selling your data to marketing companies who use algorithms to target you for ads. You ever talk on your phone, you're watching TV, you're talking about something, next thing you know, you're scrolling on Facebook and an ad pops up for what you were talking about. It's creepy. That's what they do. They make money about it. So like the blockchain, kind of takes that away, and you have more of a say as an individual. Like when you're on a blockchain and it's decentralized and you're investing into that blockchain, you can get rewarded, by staking, by doing all these different things, to where it's the community, the people invested in that chain, decentralized, who stand to gain benefit financially more so than those central institutions. And that's where I think the big difference lies, is just the level of control and say that you have while you're sending your data.
So I would have control over who gets access to my interest in buying a new board game or a book, for example.
Exactly. And it's all immutable. So like you can, yeah, it's all for everybody to see. They can't hide nothing. They can't control that information.
When you say they can't hide, who are you referring to?
The centrals, like the Googles, like they, you know what I mean? All the central banks, that hoard all this information, and pretty much, they when you sign those agreements, like no one reads the Apple agreements, no one reads the Google agreements, they're 50 pages long. But when you sign those things, you pretty much give them clearance.
I think it should be illegal that they're that long.
Oh, 100%.
They should always have the short synopsis. And I think now with ChatGPT, we might be able to get, or other like quick synopsis, like please analyze this text and tell me what they're really want, like what they're really asking in simple terms. We already saw a big case of that unfold. So yeah, anyways, that's a bit of a tangent.
Oh yeah, we can go off on a tangent for that forever. But I mean, it's I try and tell everybody that, like, these, when you sign those things, like, you don't realize you're just signing. They literally take all your information and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, but it's almost like you can't get access to all of these tools if you don't agree. So I think it's like they're built in a way that you will become socially excluded. One can look at that as social exclusion. And I remember thinking about like, oh, should we get our kids like, should they get a mobile? And at one point, at a particular age, then when they don't have access to that, it can feel like social exclusion, and that can be really tough, because in evolutionary sense, if you were socially excluded, like, you're dead. So that's just how it went. So it's like a really strong feeling to be socially excluded, and these tools are designed in a way that you have to give over pretty much as they can take from you.
Exactly. They're pretty much designed that way, so you feel that inclusion, like you want to fit in, and it's human. They prey on our human nature. Like, every human wants to belong. We long to belong. We want to feel wanted, like needed. And I think you bring up a good point with the challenge. I have kids. I have a daughter, and it's the same way. She's 9, and we just finally broke that. Well, we got her an iPad, but we very much limit her content when it comes to the no social medias, chat rooms, things like that. Just as she gets older, we want to be sure that she's an adult, that her brain can handle this kind of stuff that's going to happen. But it's a fine line to walk. It's very difficult to, like you said, to make sure they're included.
It is, and it is their world, right? So, like, you can't shield it from them, because then they're just gonna get exposed to it later and they won't know how to deal. So, yeah, there is a process for sure. I want to get back to Web3 because um, the experience of the user when, let's say, Web3 is like 100% deployed, it's active, it's running, would it still feel like a Web2 experience, in your opinion? I know I'm asking you to predict, and that can be hard.
In my opinion, that's the end goal. That's what we need to do as a space, as the Web3 space. All the builders out there need to accomplish to get that adoption, to get everybody using Web3, using blockchain. And right now, currently, as it's constructed, it does not perform that way. And I believe that's why we struggled to gain that adoption, because it is just too much harder to use, to understand than the Web 2. And I always say this, everyone's always like in Web 3, that it's a point of conversation. What can we do to bring Web 2 in to Web 3? And it's not about that. How do we integrate Web 2 into Web 3? How do we connect the two together to make them cohesive, to work together, to make us function like Web 2? Because everybody knows how to use social media. Everybody knows how to use the internet. How can we make Web 3 that same way? That's the singular focus. I think that's the next big evolution in the blockchain tech world that will make that happen. Because once that problem is solved, the adoption will happen and people will realize, hey, this is easier to use, and I can send this financial asset, for a percentage, a fraction of what it normally costs me. Like, if I go to Western Union, somebody money in Europe, they want to charge 3 to 7%. It's insane when I can send them an asset on the blockchain for a fraction of that instantaneously. They don't have to wait days to get this money. You don't have to KYC and tell them who you are, where you're getting the money from, all this stuff. It's just sent to them. And to be honest, I think a lot of the institutions, fear that, because
Yeah.
right now they have control and they don't want to give it up.
What do you say to people that would be like, well, there's a reason why you should, when you say KYC, so that was like know your customer. And the one of the reasons why you have to know your customer is because people are afraid that there are going to be like some illegal activities or criminal activities occurring. So that has been some of the media coverage. So what do you say to people that think that crypto like the exchange of assets, we'll call them assets because it's really what they are. The exchange of assets via the blockchain is like borderline scam.
I say that that's just the media influencing a narrative by picking and choosing, cherry picking what they want to cover. If there's a blockchain hack, they always cover it like, oh, 29 million was stolen here. When you don't realize central institutions, MasterCard, Visa get hacked for billions of dollars every single year. Your information is constantly stolen. Your social security numbers are constantly stolen, but that central institution's been around for a long time. So people are, they accept that's okay. The number one, in my opinion, when they say it's used for drugs and this and that, what about cash? Cash has been the number one thing in the world that's been used for drugs since it started, since all these illegal activities started. It's no different. It's just the way that they cover it. So that's kind of what I explained to them, that it's actually much more difficult to infiltrate blockchain than it is central institution. Because when you hack a central institution, you're hacking one entity. When you're hacking a blockchain, there's multiple nodes and protections in the way the ledger is designed to prevent that from happening. Are there nefarious activities? Of course. There's always going to be nefarious people in the world who have bad intentions, but it's no worse than what currently goes on. It's just how the media is currently covering it. And, like we talked about earlier, as this happens and the media coverage becomes more positive, you're starting to see less of that. You're starting to see like, hey, maybe there's something here. Like maybe it's not all just for drug dealers, gangbangers, warmongering, all these things that happen because that stuff happens constantly with governments and just using the traditional financial system.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that a lot of people, like you mentioned nodes and ledger, that there's a lot of people that are involved in. And I think when I first got into the space, I didn't really quite understand the concept of a node and what it meant and how that contributed to consensus. Yeah, so I would like to just take like a minute and just say, okay, so you have one example where you said, well, people are stealing from banks all the time. It's centralized. They're stealing your money. They're stealing your identity. But in blockchain space, it's decentralized. And that's where the nodes come in. And
Yeah.
that was like a aha moment for me. So maybe if you could explain that.
Yeah. So what I do when I explain a node, just can look at it as like a server. It's like a server that stores the blockchain information on it and creates a consensus. But there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different nodes that have this same, consensus. They keep consensus, so they store the data.
And who owns the node?
Just anybody, random people. If it's a proof of work system, you're mining Bitcoin. You run the server. You're pretty much running a server. Proof of stake, same way. It's an individual.
So the people could own the node.
The people, yes, the people can own it all. Like if I want to, on our blockchain, we're going to be a proof of stake. If I wanted to run a node, I could. I got to apply, get accepted. There's certain parameters that I have to follow, certain server requirements and hardware requirements that I have to have. But there's many of me. There's many of us. In order to attack just mine, they have to infiltrate everybody else because every other node is keeping consensus of that information that was passed down that blockchain. In order for that to get passed, all the nodes have to align and approve that transaction. So you would have to go in and get through all of them, which is very difficult. And then there's ways to do it, like 51% attacks. I won't get into any of that stuff, but it's extremely difficult. And as the technology improves, it's going to become more and more difficult. Will it always be a problem? Yes, because just like anything, there's always the evolution of technology. There's going to be hackers.
Yeah, that's like an arms race war.
Yes, an arms race. It's just
Yeah.
nonstop.
Yeah.
But it is definitely safer, in my opinion. It's harder to attack multiple entities than it is just one entity.
Right. So the function of the nodes, which is like the people, they basically say, well, there's a new transaction coming in, or it could be something like really simple, like what time is it? Right. So the time is 22:48. And so every node has to agree, or more than 50%, 51% have to agree that that is the time. And if they agree, then it gets written into into the blockchain.
Then it gets hashed into the blockchain, becomes confirmed, and then, moves on to the next block. And then that block, obviously the way it works, they kind of stack up on top of each other and create that chain,
Right.
that blockchain.
And that's why it's hard to manipulate, because you would have to manipulate a lot of independent thinkers.
Yes, you would have to. And what happens if, say, one is out of consensus, the other nodes will catch that and be like, hey, this one is wrong. And then we'll go back to a previous state of consensus to be like, hey, we got to fail that transaction. That is not, that is not adding up to what the other nodes are saying. So say there was a nefarious node, a nefarious person out there trying to infiltrate, the other ones would rein it in, protect the state, reject that, and then that person would be brought offline. There's like things like downtime penalties, things to do that you can remove these nodes, depending on what kind of a consensus mechanism you're using.
Yeah, and that's something that is written into the protocol of when that blockchain came into existence, like how they deal with those types of certain circumstances, amongst other things that would run on the chain.
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
because the word protocol is used a lot in the space. And when I came in as a scientist, I was like, a protocol for me, it was like, that's a method. Like, I get a test tube, I add this first and then this second, and then that, or, it's a protocol for handling a patient, or
It's a series of steps that are followed.
right. But it's also, the protocol is also encapsulates the business behind whatever that chain is supposed to represent, do, serve. And I think that's where, for me, the extra added value came into understanding what is meant when people talk about protocols. So that was, that was really, for me, that was an important piece of information, because like, how do I translate this for other scientists and academics that are coming into the space, or just anyone coming from a different field outside of blockchain? I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that the technology itself is evolving, that there is arms race war. So what happens then when you have a blockchain that is, developed in a certain way and it fails to be sufficiently good to withstand, like, hacking, or what then happens? Does it just disappear, or?
Well, it will never disappear, because it will always be, on the internet, as long as the internet doesn't disappear to the way they're written. But what happens, just like any other failed businesses, in Web 2 in real life, Sears, was the biggest, retail company in the world, and they failed. Like, they got left behind. So it's the same thing with evolving technologies. I always consider, like, what's happening right now is very adjacent to the .com boom of the 90s and all the websites, everything that was coming out. And then there was that bubble that popped, everything crashed, and only the strong survived.
Yeah, the ones with substance, real substance.
Yes, substance that people were going to use that solved problems survived. And I believe the same thing is going to happen with blockchain, and especially the central exchanges out there. The smaller ones, like we call them tier 1s, 2s, and 3s. Obviously, a tier 1 is the well-known ones like Binance, Coinbase, some of the very big central exchanges. But there's literally hundreds of other ones that are, in my opinion, are going to fail. There's a lot of other blockchains out there that don't solve any problems. They're just trying to make money.
How does someone navigate that? Like, how does a new person come in and say, oh, well, I didn't even really know what an exchange was until I was like, oh, okay, that's where people trade their crypto. Okay, fine. I get it now. But then, like you said, like, there's tier 1s, tier 2, tier 3. So for someone coming into the space, what's like this maybe lowest risk exchange to maybe start with, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it'd be obviously like the tier 1s, the Coinbases of the world, the Binances of the world. I'm trying to think some more like tier 1s, OKX, KuCoin, Kraken, some of these more well-established exchanges that have been around for multiple years.
How can you tell that it's a well-established change? Like, is it the volume of trading that is occurring?
No, because that can be manipulated with market makers, things like that. I always go just how long have they been around, and track record. Like, show me proof. Like, show me that you guys are on the up and up. Have you had any kind of nefarious activity? Have you been sued? I look into like that kind of stuff, like legal wise. Are you guys going to be able to function when future regulations do come around? So it's all about track history and understanding what they are. It's like when you research a stock, a company, when you decide to make an investment, you shouldn't just go into it blind. You got to do your research, look at the time, like, hey, what's this company doing? Are they solving a problem? Is this going to provide a legitimate service? And the bigger ones obviously have stood the test of time. And even though I say test of time, like we're still only talking 8 to 10 years. It's still so early, but you got exchanges popping up out of the woodwork, like that been around for 30, 60 days saying all this thing. We got this much volume. We're doing $100 million, $200 million a day in volume. Well, that's all bot. That's all computer manipulated. Just, that's not actually organic. And once you're in the space long enough, you can kind of spot that and see what to look for. And then someone like me who believes in true decentralization, where I don't even need that central exchange. I don't want them to have my information, control my funds, lock my funds, because that's kind of what happens is, I started with Coinbase, and to this day, if I want to make an investment, like decide to bring on my bank account to Coinbase, they can hold my funds for up to 10 days. Like that's just crazy to me. And, so what I'm more into the DeFi decentralized applications, like decentralized swaps that are controlled by those nodes that we talked about earlier.
What would be examples of those?
So like decentralized swaps, some of the big ones people would know about would be like Uniswap, Radium, Pancake Swap, on the BSC network. Big so like swaps like that. There's dozens, if not hundreds of them, but the biggest well-known ones are Uniswap, and I would say Radium, the Jupiter exchange, and then what we're building here at PawChain. Our Paw Swap, everything we do is going to be fully decentralized, controlled by those nodes, by the people. And then we're going to have something called a DAO, which is going to be a voting mechanism to decide the future growth of the project. And that's based on the holders. The holders have voting power to decide, hey, do we want to make this move? Do we want to invest in this? Do we want to hire these developers? Kind of like what direction do we want to take moving forward?
I'm really happy that you brought that up because I wanted us to contrast what how a typical entity, or let's say you're a startup and you've gone just beyond startup now, right? So you have like a board and you've got your shareholders, and so you're just sort of in this zone of progress. How would said entity compare to an equivalent in the blockchain space? Because you said a DAO, I really want to contrast the voting and the shareholding and the decision making that would go on in a traditional company that perhaps has their website on Web2, and then you have your blockchain based company like PAW. How would they compare?
Okay, so like when you got a big company, a centralized institution, you make an investment. I use the Coinbase platform. I don't have a say in any of the decisions that they make. Any of these companies make based on any holdings I have, any of their services they use. I am powerless to voice my opinion, share my opinion, what I think the direction should be of their APYs, their percentages they pay. With decentralization, like at PawChain, some of these other blockchains, these decentralized apps, as a holder, as an investor, I have a say in staking protocols. Hey, who's going to get the rewards here? Who's making money right now off of my money? Is it the central institution that's making money off of me? Because that's exactly what's happening now. It ain't me making money, but in DeFi, I can make my money work for not only me, but the entire community. Like it's that power of having a voice, having a say, having a vote. You know what I mean? That empowerment. Kind of like how we say in the States, like your voice, your vote. That's like all we can do to have a say in what we do, and that's kind of like the ethos of what we're trying to do in decentralization with blockchain, and especially at PawChain. It's like when we do have a board. Like we have with the Genesis team. I'm on it. There's like 12 of us that kind of steer the direction of the project now, but nothing we do isn't without say. Everything is discussed. It's kind of like an open forum. And then when the building is done, because this is a misconception too with a lot of people, when you're building a decentralized network, in the beginning there has to be a little bit of centralization, decision making power that happens. Otherwise, nobody makes any decisions.
Yeah, I think that's
Nothing gets
pretty
done.
clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So once that's done, though, then we hand it over to everybody else and say, like, here you go. Here's this thing. Now it's yours. Now you can grow it. You can build it.
And that can feel very foreign, like to really think, oh, like, okay, so the board doesn't decide anymore what the direction is. Please continue. So now we have, do people, so how do they become a voter?
It's usually based on like holdings, your holding percentage. So say I hold, half percent of Spire. Like say this. I'm just going to use round numbers, not PAW numbers, just for like easy math. Say there's 1,000,000 shares. I hold, I hold 100,000 of them. I would have 10% voting power. That's usually like how it's decided. And then when there's a proposal, and anybody can make a proposal saying like, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to go into the AI field and hire these AI devs, put it up for a proposal. Then the holders, the community would come and vote on that proposal based on their holdings. Say, hey, this is what we want to do. And then that decision will be made based on how long you decide to make that proposal.
Right. And how would that differ then from like a standard entity today, like a non-decentralized company?
Well, usually those decisions are made in the boardroom with those 12 people, and that's it. And like they have based, they're obviously they say they want to do what's in best interest of the shareholders, when most of the time the biggest shareholders are sitting in that room. You know what I mean? It's they cater to them, and there's a little more power, in the space as the DeFi. Like what I always say, like with this space, what I love about it is the ability to have influence and say in building. You know what I mean? And like I can say I had a part of that with this investment, with what I'm doing, with the time I'm spending 20, 30 years from now. I can say I helped build that. Any other kind of investment, in the Web 2 world, I invest in Apple, I invest in Facebook, NVIDIA, all these big firms. Like I don't really have a say. I'm just doing that to grow my portfolio, to, lead in this company. I'm just putting in, but I don't really have a say. And I think that's powerful. And I think that's what's going to bring people in, is that aware of, like, man, I have a little bit of control again. Like I got a say in this, and
Yeah.
that's empowering. And that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do here, and
Yeah.
I think there's a thirst for that.
A lot of the media coverage has focused primarily on blockchain/crypto as like in the DeFi sense. So decentralized finance. This is all about money, 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 money. And not that that is a great topic, because it is a great topic, but there are other blockchain, I will call them startups, because I don't know what else we would call it. We don't have another, what's the startup word for a blockchain based company? Do you have a different term?
I mean, I just call it a startup. It's what it is. It's like a startup. Yeah.
What, and you're like, there are other like applications, right? For when companies start to use blockchain technology, they may or may not have a cryptocurrency, like a token associated with the company. Some do, some don't. I would like to shed light on the idea and bring it out on the forefront, actually, that not all blockchain based companies are about crypto, but they are actually addressing real world problems. And maybe you have a few in mind that you could share.
I absolutely, like, to be honest, that's like our main focus at PawChain is not so much the cryptocurrency, it's the technology, right? It's just the sending of data faster, safer, and cheaper than ever before. And like I think crypto itself obviously gets the media coverage because it's financial, it's money, it's all everybody wants to talk about. But when you dig down deep, what's behind the crypto? It's going to be, deeper than that. It's going to be logistics. It's going to be medical records. It's going to be scientific records when you're doing experiments, how you can put it all on the ledger and it will always be there and send it to somebody else, faster, safer than ever before. And you'll be able to pull it up when you want to see it, and it can't be changed. It's immutable. So it's always going to be there. And I think once people realize that, and these companies kind of focus more on that, than more so the crypto side of it is when I think everybody's going to come to the party and realize, hey, this is legitimate. Like we can use this. And I'll use an example. Just think about somebody who's a vegan or a vegetarian. You want to find out where that tomato came from. Using the blockchain, you can trace that seed down to where that seed came from, where it was planted, what soil it was in, what state it was from, when it was grown, date it was picked, when it showed up to your doorstep or at the store, and you can hold in your hand and know that this information I'm getting is immutable and this is exactly where this came from. Like that's the kind of direction where I think this is going to end up. And once people realize that, and there's products out there as this tech evolves, that's where this is going. That's the kind of level I see this in. That's why I believe everybody is going to be using the blockchain in the future. Is it going to take some time? Of course it is. It's new. But once people understand that they can do things like that, I think that's what's going to happen.
And this is actually one of the reasons why we're making this recording or the podcast today was really to shed some light on some of the I would say like the first layer of information surrounding blockchain. You mentioned being able to be like introducing more transparency in where our food was, like where it was grown, potentially how it was produced, where it was refined. I mean, this could be anything.
Anything. I know a lot of people right now are doing in the marijuana field for like medicinal marijuana, find out where their seeds are planted, where the flower is grown, like, what kind of strain it is. Like you can go any field, any kind of food. Doesn't even have to be food. Just think of logistics, shipping. You know what I mean? Tracking packages.
Shipping is blockchain is being used already in shipping. So yeah, like a lot of supply chain management has use cases for blockchain, and that's been deployed for quite a few years now, from my understanding. I think it's just nobody talks about it.
Medical records too. You're a doctor, you're a nurse.
Those are not yet on chain, I would say.
No, but I think they will be. I really do. I think in the future, now is it going to happen tomorrow, next year? Probably not. But in the next 5 to 10 years, I think absolutely.
What do you think is the number one reason why we would want our medical records on chain? So one advantage, of course, is that they're immutable. Okay, that's good to a certain extent until you get sick and then insurance company finds out and blah, blah, blah. So then that's like what some people are worried about. But there are other reasons, surely. Why do we want our medical records on chain?
Well, I obviously you mentioned the immutable one, but then just like point of access, like quickly, like right now, it drives me nuts that every time I go to the doctor, and I've been there a half dozen times, or I go to the dentist, I go somewhere, and I'm still doing paperwork. I'm still filling out information. Like, how do you guys not have this on file? Or you got files, but there's endless cabinets full of them. In the end, I think it's inefficiency. And once these companies realize they could be more efficient, AKA be more profitable, that's when you're going to see it. And I think that's what the medical records will realize is like, hey, we can be more profitable using blockchain. And I think that's when you're going to see the shift as well.
Yeah, so that's like building up infrastructure.
Yes.
I know like Denmark, for example, we're highly digital in terms of our medical records, but not everything is connected still, even though we're still, I think they've done a really good job. There's tons of gaps and it's not perfect, but it does make things a lot easier for sure. And you can run like bigger studies here because you have you can find, you have the possibility to apply, like to get permission to contact certain people that satisfy a particular, constellation of symptoms. And when I was thinking of the medical records, and I know there are some DAOs or some other decentralized science, startups that are trying to put medical records on chain. And one of the reasons that they do that is for example, in rare disease scenarios, those people then can decide to, provide that information. But the companies that want to develop solutions or treatment, they can then contact through an anonymous form, anonymously, and that information can be sent and received in an anonymous fashion. through the chain or through the protocol. Like, I don't know what the correct term.
And keep in mind too, you don't need to have a public ledger blockchain. These companies will be able to use private ledger blockchains that can only be accessed from those the people with credentials to be able to get access to that information. I think that's the direction that a lot of these companies are going to decide to go as well.
Yes. So those patients can then either decide to donate, or they can even get paid to share their data. They can either contribute to a solution or a treatment, or let's say for me, like as far as I know, I don't have any rare diseases or symptoms. Then, you know, I can then decide if I want to, if someone contacts me, can we use your data for this study? And then I can read about it, and then I can decide, and then I can get paid to give, and then I can keep track. I know who has it, who doesn't. So that was one of the use cases for medical records in blockchain. But of course, one of the biggest one is that it's immutable, and that it is maintained via the nodes, which is the people. So it's very decentralized. And there are other like completely different applications too. Like I was also made aware, and I think it was quite nice to feel like if you have a company that say like goes into buying houses, like real estate. Not that I'm not pushing real estate as a good investment, but it is the possibility that you don't have to buy the whole house. You can just buy like a small fraction of that.
RWAs and fractionalization.
Yeah. And so you just get a few tokens, and then you own a little bit of the house.
Fractionalizing, that might be the direction we're going, because if you look at certain things, the way certain financials work out, and the rich get richer, poor get poor, it's getting more and more difficult to afford properties for these people to provide. So we may have to go that route to where we're starting to fractionalize and like, hey, I don't have a ton of money right now, but I got enough money to make this investment on this property that may be able to give me a higher yield percentage gain than I didn't have before. I can't afford this entire property. I can't afford to invest $1 million on this lakefront property, but you know what? I can afford to invest $5,000 on this lakefront property, and it provides opportunity to people who may not have had it before. And that's special to me. That's like what I really love about blockchain, about that RWA, real world assets, tokenization of real world things like real estate, like other things that can provide some more opportunity to people that aren't as privileged or as fortunate, as other people around the world. Because we talk in Europe. Obviously, I'm in the States. Our development index is high. You don't realize like these other countries in the world, especially people from Africa, that $100 to them is like it could be a week's salary, a month's salary, and if they can just be able to make a little investments on a fractionalization asset, it can change their life, and that's opportunity, and that's the main reason why I'm here, why I'm passionate about it, because I want to provide those kind of opportunities and be a part of that movement.
What about the science space? Because that's the space that I'm coming from. Um, have you given it some thought in terms, like you said, medical records, and you mentioned science earlier? I know it's not your space, but I'm quite curious to hear what types of thoughts you've had regarding how you see blockchain influencing, scientific development, progress, medicine.
Well, I mean, look at it this way: when it comes to funding, every you know this as a scientist, it can be very difficult to accrue funding and get the money needed to like go out and do these experiments, run these tests that you need to do this research, right? So if you can use blockchain and make like kind of open it up to be like, hey, this is where the money's going, everything's transparent. Make investments using blockchain like those RWAs to be able to raise funds. Think about it as a way of fundraising. Currently you got to like petition governments or like, entities to be able to get this money. If you can do that decentralized, imagine rallying a big group of people who have an affliction to a certain disease. Like there's, 15, 20,000 people around the world that have this affliction to this rare disease. You can, gather them around, and they can use blockchain, they can use DeFi to be able to help fund this research, this project for these scientists, that it's not the government making this decision, it's the people who are actually afflicted. And, I think that's going to, that has some serious potential in the future.
And why do you so now I'll just be a bit provocative. So why don't they just build a website and say, come fund this project for this super rare disease? Why would blockchain outperform the Web2 website?
Because the way it's currently constructed is because I don't think there's transparency. I think when someone just creates a website, there's somebody in charge. No one tracks where that money goes. No one knows exactly how much money is being spent on this. With the blockchain, it's all there for information. You can post it up and be like, hey, this is where your money's going. This is the wallet it was sent to. This is how it's going to be spent. There's those layers of, being able to see what it's getting invested in, being able to track where the progress is of this development. Like, you just donate money to a website for, we'll just say, I'll just use like the ice bucket water challenge, for Lou Gehrig's disease that happened, and that was a great boom for that disease, that affliction. It really caught on, went viral. But in the end, did you know exactly how much money went to that research? Like, there was no control. Like, who was doing the research? With this, they'll know the scientists.
And are they being
They'll
accountable?
know- yes. Are they being? Yes.
Yeah.
Are they being held accountable? Are they living
Oh.
up to what they said they were going to do with blockchain? So you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to track them and be like, hey, you guys said you were going to spend money on this. That didn't go there. What's going on here? You'll be held accountable. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that accountability that just simply doesn't exist currently.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on accountability. I think there's been a lot of research funds that have been funneled and they often result in less.
There's a level of distrust, right? There's a level of distrust there. And then the end user or the people investing.
Yeah, and I'm coming from the space. Like, I've seen it.
Yeah, they don't trust it, so they're not going to donate. If I know that this $1,000 I'm sending is actually all $1,000 are actually being spent on A, B, and C, I'm going to be much more inclined to make that investment, because then I can see the progress. I can track the results. Like, hey, 3 years later, look at the results they got. Look at this information, this amazing research that they can develop now and make future treatments that can all be tracked. And I think that's where it's lacking currently, is there isn't a level of like, hey, how well did that seed funding do? How well did all that money coming in? What problems, how far did they actually get into research? They just simply, don't know. And it's just kind of unorganized. And, I think that level of like what I was mentioning, is going to change all that and will make people feel empowered to be like, I got some control now. I can help my brother who has this rare disease and see the progress of this. And you know what? Not only that, helping these scientists who mean well and aren't just at the whim of like, God, I pray that this university or this entity funds this research, or what am I going to do? And then guess what? They take all the credit and all the work I just did. No one knows who I am. With that blockchain, they'll know that your name, you were the one working on this, that you spearheaded this, that your team developed this research and delivered this result.
Yeah, that's definitely one angle. The other angle so we've covered funding, maybe also proof of work, but in the scientific sense and not in the blockchain sense. So who did it and why, and who gets the credit. And then there is the possibility of like the data sets itself. So there's a lot of issues in the scientific realm where you have studies that are run and you can't get the same result. So you have multiple published studies and you can't duplicate the results. And there's, of course, not everything should be 100% the same, right? Like, the world changes all the time. The temperature is different. The people that you have in the study will be slightly different. There's a lot of randomness. So you don't expect the data set to be exactly the same, but you do expect to, like, if you're going to draw any robust conclusions, that both data sets should support those conclusions. And what we're finding now is that, like, most studies you cannot replicate. And so you have all this research coming out from all different places in the world globally. We're doing the same thing. We're asking very similar questions, and we're just like flooding the market, I guess you could say, the scientific articles, which is like a market of information. We're flooding that. It looks like it's actually an inflated view of progress, in my opinion. So there's like tons of stuff coming out, but there's half of it, more than half you can't reproduce. The other like quarter, you can't understand it. And the other quarter is just garbage. So it's like, every once in a while you find something that is useful. And I'm hoping that when we see some new DeSci based companies coming out of like the blockchain space, that one, we address the funding. Number two, we address transparency of, where that funding is going and what's come out of it.
Talking about where the funding's coming, and it's not just in scientific, like anytime there's any kind of research or studies done, first thing I always do, look who funded it. Was this funded by the pharmaceutical company? Was this funded by this? And with blockchain and DeFi, you can get rid of that. You can get rid of that influence and be like, this was funded by the people suffering from this affliction or wanted the answers to these, this question. So that influence, that sway, of a central entity controlling this is removed. So like that research, is truly independent and factual. It's not influenced or swayed. That's a big thing. I see all these studies. It's like, who funded it? What message are they trying to push? That's just kind of,
And there's like another problem that sort of builds on that. And that's the idea that only positive results are funded or published. So like if I run a study and find that, this particular treatment doesn't help you, then that is actually sometimes like if I can't find a significant difference between my two groups, like if I have like a placebo group and then I have a treatment group and they are the same, then people will look at the study and say, oh, well, you didn't design it right. Like the protocol was wrong, right? So that's considered a negative result. I'm simplifying a little bit, but it is considered a negative result, and then you can't publish. So there is the pressure on scientists to find something significant. So if you tag that on top of what you just said, then you just have like this horrible cocktail for misinformation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and misinformation influenced by big financial institutions.
Yeah, and egos.
The egos and money. Yeah, yes, keeping your job. I got to give them the answer they want, the results they want.
Yeah, I have to publish. Yeah, I have to show that I'm a good scientist. And the reality is that they are.
And to be honest, like that's the whole that's not what being a scientist is about. It's supposed to be about independence, solving problems. Like the results are the results, whether they're what you wanted to hear or what you not wanted to hear. This is what the science says. These are the facts. Just because it's not what you wanted, should be published regardless. That's just my opinion. Obviously, I'm not a scientist, but like I kind of see it from that level, or somebody who seems like everybody always has, and I say this in the space too. Influencers always a motive, and if you're willing to understand a motive, you get a much better perception of the world and what everybody's trying to accomplish here. But I really think the blockchain can help solve a lot of those issues for scientists with all kinds of things, not just the funding, but everything else, the tracking of the information, like you said, publishing negative results or positive.
The data sets, yeah.
Yeah, just it's not positive or negative. Publishing results.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
The data and
the
then,
data.
Yeah.
Data. Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, of course the method too, because you need both. You need to know how the data was collected. And so there's a lot more information that could be standardized for sure. It will require like a huge paradigm shift in terms of thinking and like what is a publication, what is a scientific achievement. In the scientific field, we have a lot of incentives, which we know are wrong. They were actually, like, if you go back to the roots, they were never meant to be a reflection of the individual. That was really just meant to be a reflection of like how much something was being read in a journal, but it somehow transferred to the individual scientist. Another tangent or topic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that will need some new thinking. In one of the spaces that you guys had, where you guys invited me to join a space, And in that, you asked the question about like how can we, or is it possible to like really shield blockchain and all of this notion of, and I don't want to say utopia, like it's not a utopia type notion, but how do you shield the big movers or the ones that hold a lot of the power now or a lot of influence now from coming into the space and just sort of taking over and just regaining that power? I mean, is that a realistic, maybe not realistic, is it possible?
It is definitely possible, but you have to establish kind of like that groundwork, lay that foundation, and hold that foundation now. And you're already kind of seeing it with the Bitcoin ETFs, the Ethereum ETFs, aka billionaires, multi big conglomerates getting involved and kind of pretty much taking over Bitcoin and Ethereum, and being able to influence these prices and getting
With a tweet?
involved with a tweet. Yeah, with like all this stuff. And like, yes, it's possible. People can come in and centralize this thing, but if you have a good foundation from the start and you're a company deciding to solve a problem and you do not relinquish the control because you have that foundation laid out, that structure that cannot be changed or influenced, I think that's the only way you can do it. And Bitcoin did a pretty good job the way it was launched, the way it was designed to prevent this. But in my opinion, nobody is, everything is kind of susceptible to influence, to big money. And like, I don't think, this space is any different. But I think there's the opportunity, since we are on the ground floor, to be able to lay that foundation to keep as much of that out as possible. But unfortunately, it's going to be there. It's just big money, dictates the world. It just does. These big companies have so much influence. They lobby Congress, they lobby governments to have these says. To be honest, it's going to be up to us, the individual, to be able to try and take some of that power back and then hang on to it. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do.
And that's so in the space they're often referred to as retailers. So like the individual purchaser of a Bitcoin, like me, for example, I would be considered a retailer. And so we need more average people like me coming in and like, taking part. And that is the only way to maintain balance. I'll just call it a balance, because we'll never be in control, but we'll definitely be able to have a balance.
And the thing is, this technology, this space is so new that opportunity exists. So like, that's why I'm trying to tell everybody, like, hey, this opportunity is there. We can seize this opportunity now to prevent a lot of this from happening. It's the same thing with, the scientists in your field, how you guys have the opportunity, like you can take control and seize this and kind of change things. And obviously they'll still be at influence. They'll fight you all the way, but you can band together and be like, get in early and be like, hey, we have an alternative now that if we all work together, we can change this and do this.
I definitely think that there is an opportunity for like building spaces where people can publish their data, so that it doesn't become siloed in some university backdoor or some company, where the truth can still remain in existence. Like we really need to, like, even the outcomes of follow-up studies where people are taking certain medications, like after a while, maybe the producers of medications will not, they have an obligation, they have a legal obligation to follow up and run and track things. But you can still run independent studies, and having that data be publicly available forever is also super important. And that's just one like really minor, not minor, but like a small example. So we do need to come together as a community and say we want to put the information out there that people need to know now. It's about what's the best medicine, well, move, get good sleep, eat well. Like those are the top three, right? Be social, number 4, like all of those things. And I think people are forgetting that we have those, and we need more studies to be out there, be open to show that. That's just one I guess I really need to get that off my chest.
Yeah, no, keep
I
going, get it
no,
off.
I
You
just
know,
like
it's
I just think that we need to get the data out there. And it needs to be open and it needs to be put out as soon as possible. And in an understandable format. I think this is just also goes beyond blockchain because blockchain will be a way to store it, be able to make sure that no one tampers with it. And we can send and receive it to whomever person around the world. Any groups, any computational science groups can come in and they can, run their analysis on it and they can get access to it. But we actually need to get the data out there and we need it to be in a shareable format. And that is probably another layer on top of the blockchain, which I think is what you were alluding to in the beginning. Like, what is Web 4 going to look like? And you said AI, and I'm like, well, maybe yeah, I think that will be fun to imagine, like, what Web 4 will be.
it's crazy to think about, like, when I think about Web3 into Web4 into, into the future, like, look at it where we are now and how far we've come in just 5 years and 10 years. Like, where we're gonna be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And as I mentioned earlier, like, the opportunity to, take some more control away from the current entities that do have control, it's available here to us. And that's like the biggest selling point to me in Web3, into Web4, into blockchain, is like that opportunity exists. And how many other times in history have we had that kind of opportunity? And I think that in the end, that's what we're here for, what we want to happen. So much good can come from this. Well, much more so than the negative that you hear about in the media. There is an opportunity exists for like transformative, human potential and innovation and transparency. That's the big word in the space, like transparency. Currently, there just isn't a lot of it in the space. It's just all controlled. Nothing's really transparent. What do you see? Even media has influence, like all the mainstream media you see is influenced one way or the other. If you don't think critically and just like when I read a news story, I just want to see the news story. I'll make my own conclusions of what I think. I don't need the perspective. I don't need the opinion. And that's how I view news. But it's like that influence is out there.
But it's how do you get a new format for that? And I think that's something like that's also a really good scientific question. Like, how do you deliver information with as little bias? It's impossible to have no bias. We will not argue on that. But how, like, when you say, I want the news and I don't want the perspective, I think what we'll see is new ways of delivering information. We see like snippets of it now, like where other people will, I think Twitter or X has something like where people can add whether or not they felt. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how it works. I've just seen it like under some weird news broadcast, and then it says like most people are saying that this is untrue. So it's like you can weigh in on the news. So I think it'll be up to us to be able to figure out how do we find ways to communicate that information. One way is to use blockchain as a medium. And therefore, it's like a foundational technology to enable that. But the innovation will happen on top of the blockchain where we'll be like, how do we actually deliver the information so that it is with as little bias as possible? Or maybe it's two completely different perspectives. Maybe you have the geography attached to the information.
I mean, to be honest, like that's like the $1 million question, right? Like how do you deliver anything without bias? Because bias is added by every single person's opinion. I think what happens is opinion now with social media taking hold. People take opinion as news. Like somebody said something and be like, "Oh, look at this news story." Well, if you looked at what actually happened, that's just their opinion on what their political stance is, and it's the same thing on all sides of the spectrum. So I think it just comes down to like educating your kids. I don't know, like just to understand, like think critically, understand that there's two sides to every story. You'll always, have empathy where to like walk in someone else's shoes. Like,
Where's the
oh, we can go out
source?
for the, where's the
Yeah.
source exactly?
Where was the
Who's
seed
source?
growing?
What's their
Yeah, where did the
motivation,
tomato
right?
come from?
At least with the blockchain, you can see, okay, this is where this originated. Here's where
Yeah.
this is. I
Yeah.
know that's fact.
Well, that would be interesting, right? So you have someone on the ground taking the photo of what just happened. It gets put on chain, then that gets picked up and added with somebody else who geography gets, so that you can really track it.
You can see like, hey, here's what happened. There's no influence behind it. But then what's going to happen, they'll take that and then they'll put their influence behind it. Like, look at this. And that's always going to happen because everyone's got an opinion. It's just how it works. And everybody's opinion, they make a lot of times is based on clicks, views, because they monetize that.
Do you think people want to know the truth? Because there's like a couple things that are lingering here, and I feel that it's brewing. And number one is, how do you actually incentivize people, the everyday retailers, the average people like me, to get on some chain? It doesn't have to be Bitcoin, it can be something else. How do we get them to care? How do we motivate them? Because you said, well, it's a really good thing. Okay, it's good for society, but people don't act in the best interest of society. They usually act in the best interest of themselves.
Of course.
Okay. And this, yeah. So that's like, how do we, like, I really feel like that's like you said, there was $1 million question. I feel like this is the $1 million question. Like, yeah.
I think what it comes down to, it's the number one mover in the world is financial. It's money. How, what people don't realize that you can make extreme amount of wealth and money just by getting involved now early into the blockchain and investing in these companies, investing in these startups, understanding what problems are solved to get ahead of it, make APYs.
What do you mean? What is APY?
Like percentage yields. Like when you invest in like I'm investing in $1 stocks, bonds. It's paying a 4% yield. It's paying 10% yield. There's liquidity providers. There's different levels of passive income involved with blockchain and companies that are much higher than current centralized options. And the thing is, they'll argue and say, well, that's not safe. That's just simply not true. If you put in the time and research, and I did this, I got into something called liquidity providing a couple years ago, pretty much where I take my money, provide to this platform, and people use that money to facilitate trading, and
so
I
you're
get paid a
loaning,
percentage.
basically.
I get paid a percentage. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And it's much higher than any other kind of, option out there, not in the Web3, Web2 world.
So would you say the way to get more people on board is really about financial literacy?
Yeah, financial, like the opportunity, like we talked about with the RWAs, the people that don't have much, being able to get involved and actually be able to get ahead and not continue to fall behind. Like show them that this opportunity out there, it's here, it exists. Here is the opportunity. You just need to put in time to learn. And the thing is, right now, the way it's constructed, it's very difficult. We talked about this earlier in your space, to understand the space, to get involved. And what we need to do is simplify this process. Us builders, people here, what we're doing at PAW is we're trying to simplify that process so we can bring these people in to understand that, hey, I can get involved. I can change my financial. This is not too difficult for me. This is a legitimate option.
It's a lot
for me.
for someone coming
It's
in
a
for
lot.
the very first time. I remember where someone was like, "You got to get a wallet. Like, hurry up! You got to get a wallet." I was like, "What do you mean? Like, what is it?" Like, I didn't understand what it meant to have a wallet, and that seems so simple. Like for you, that's something you learned 10 years ago.
And when you realize that every one of these blockchains has their own wallet, they can't talk to each other. All these central exchanges, you bring in assets, you can't use it to buy an asset on this chain. You got to go to this wallet. Then you got to send it back to the central exchange, do all this crazy bridging, all these things, like hundreds of steps, tons of transactions, fees. No one's going to do that.
And that's what you guys are fixing, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. We're streamlining the process. So right now, there's hundreds of different blockchains. Obviously, Bitcoin's a blockchain, Ethereum, Solana, this names some of the big ones. They cannot communicate with one another. Like you have to have your own application.
That's like
You have to
having different
interact.
banks that can't talk to each other.
Yes, they can't
Yeah.
talk to each other. So,
Yeah.
like, in order to transact on one another, there's this complicated series of bridging that exists to be able to make those transactions that make it difficult on the end user. Multiple transactions, multiple wallets. It's just complicated. So, what we're doing is connecting all these chains together to facilitate that communication by using our network. So, where you just need one wallet, one place, one stop shop. I want to use this currency to interact with this currency, and you can do that. So we're like that, I call it like the world translator.
And how far along are you guys in development?
Man, we're developing rapidly. We're still a baby infancy when it comes to like actually being live. Our blockchain's only been out for 6 months, but we've been building now for almost 2 years. This has been an idea from many years before that. So we're still extremely young. We're currently we're way ahead of the game though. Normally, like been out for 6 months. We already have our own wallet, our own swap. We're connected to 11 different chains currently. Non-EVM chains too, which is like when I say EVM, that's the Ethereum virtual machine. It's how Ethereum runs. There's other blockchains that do not run using that. So we're able to connect to those networks as well. And by the time it's said and done, I think another, year or two of development will be able to connect 60, 70 of these chains and continue to build on our platform to where people will be able to come in, download a single app, and be able to use whatever currency, swap whatever they want, pretty much come to this single place for investments, for making those liquidity providing, like I talked about, all these different things in one place, simplifying it, provide that opportunity that we talked about for people like that. That's the goal.
You're like a highway. You're like this massive interconnected highway. Almost like reminds me of how the brain is like you have information highways in the brain. So you have like different types of matter or cells that you have some that are responsible for communication and then you have some
Exactly.
responsible for storing. So yeah, you totally remind me. I'm just imagining like these millions of different chains just out in space and you're just sort of like the glue in between that can connect all of them.
Yeah, I always can like I think of a sphere, and there's like those old spheres that had the electrical waves on them. Like when you're a kid and you touch your hand on them, they all go there. Like PAW chain, we're that middle ball, and all those like other connecting everything together, and everything will facilitate through us. So what's cool is like we're not replacing or competing with these networks. If you still want to use those networks, you're comfortable with them, you can. We just want to be that unification that provides that connection.
It makes sense. I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea. It makes a lot of sense that you would need this, and it will simplify the process in the end for all users. And it probably has use cases that you haven't even imagined yet.
Oh, there's stuff that I'm sure we haven't even thought of, like tip the iceberg. And like I said, there's like reason why I think Web 2 hasn't really fully adopted, well, come into Web 3 yet, is because the current solutions have problems. Ethereum has a scalability issue and gas fees. When network congestion is high, it can cost $200, $300 to send a transaction. You're never going to be able to go grocery shopping and use crypto if you go to buy your groceries and there's a $200 charge.
Yeah, you'd be pissed.
You'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah.
Other blockchains have problems with crashing. Like they scale, they have congestion issues, and they crash, they shut down, or they just simply can't communicate with one another. So if I want to use this currency, I can't. So like those real world applications aren't there. But the way we built it, not only can we communicate with all these chains, we're infinitely scalable. So we don't have gas on our network. The way we built it is everything can scale infinitely to however many transactions per second. We don't have to worry about any of that. Pretty much these main issues, and that's why I'm most excited about, is because I think our ability as we grow to bring Web 2, point of sale systems and things like that, that's what's going to really set us apart. Not just the sense of crypto and investments and projects and meme coins launching on our chain, which will happen, has happened. It's going to be the real world use case that I think is going to really separate us.
Why do people why are there so many chains? When this was one of my questions that I had when I first entered the space, and I feel like everybody feels like their chain is the best, and so they want to make their own chain. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's tribalism because what's going on is a lot of these chains are kind of just like, forks or copy and paste of previous chains. Because what we did, it's extremely difficult to build a brand new blockchain from scratch. Like it's incredible amount. We're talking hundreds of thousands of coding hours, multiple devs to be able to build this infrastructure. And way it's been going is most decided that I can just make money by just doing this kind of chain, and it can become $1 billion project. I can get some venture capitalist investors, few people can make money, and kind of like nobody solved that inherent issue. And as that's happened, more and more companies doing it, and it's splintered the entire space. And it's just all it's really doing is spreading that liquidity, that money out between them, but it's not really solving any issues. When was the last time somebody came out and built something brand spanking new? And that's what we're doing because it's hard. It's so hard. I always tell everything we do is difficult. Everything we do is hard to get the people to use something new. Understand, not only is it new tech as a whole, like the blockchain, but what we're building is new. But we embrace that hard. Like I love it. I love to be a part of it because I think in the end, after these early days, these struggles, this startup, as we grow, it's going to like solve that problem and unify the space. And I think that's what we need to be successful, to where now the scientists, your field, can come in and say, we can use that technology to become more efficient, to become profitable, to, make these things happen.
Yeah, I definitely have come to the realization that the DeFi space needs to, yeah, there needs to be some issues that are solved, and once those become super fluid, like those problems are essentially non-existent, things are much more like very very seamless. Um, then you'll get like a huge influx over. I do know like DeSci is growing currently, but I see like we're in the same boat, right? So as DeSci gets bigger and bigger, or DeFi, sorry, gets bigger and bigger, um, DeSci will be able to benefit from a lot of those advancements. Um, Even though, I mean, we're still growing and thriving, because there is a space and it's young, as you said, and now is the time to get in. But I definitely see that we are in the same boat. I was wondering, Brian, before the end of this podcast,
Yeah.
is there a question that you thought I was going to ask you and didn't, or is there something that you would like to say?
Oh man, no, I think that the main thing that I wanted to cover is to be sure, and I think we did do this, was that blockchain is for everybody. It's not just kept. It's not just for cryptocurrency. It's not just for financial gains. It's for everyone. Like you have the opportunity as an individual to get involved, to have a say. And I think that's the main thing I wanted to discuss. And it will provide benefits to not just investors, people who come in and just buy an asset, but the broader use of this technology in the scientific field, in the medical field, in the educational field, data storage, all these different things is the main thing I want to get across, and to let everybody know that that opportunity to get involved exists right now. And there are people out there are projects out there like us that are attempting to make it easier to provide that opportunity to bring people in. But other than that, this is, I very much look forward to this. This was an excellent conversation today. You are a wonderful host.
Oh,
Just
thank
great
you.
conversation. I look forward to getting on here again.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna do a part 2 because I had a list of keywords I wanted us to cover. We went through the first half, so we'll definitely follow with the part 2, where we dive in even deeper into the space for those that are, already gone past level 1.
Yeah, we can get into some more, some more to tech, how things are built, how we're built, consensus mechanisms, all that kind of stuff. Tokenomics, we can get into, how it works, like things like that. Yeah, absolutely, would love that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. It was a fantastic day. This has been great for me. I'm so happy that we did this, and I can't wait to do the second. Yeah, I can't wait for part 2. So
Thank you, Shelly. I very much look forward to it. I look forward to seeing everything and sharing the information. If and obviously in the future, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Just look into what we're doing over here at PAW Chain. We're not just a crypto company; we are a blockchain technology company, and that's what we're focused on.
With a strong community too, I
Very,
noticed.
very strong community, and that was built organically, the right way by people who believe in what we're doing. It's not, like I said, it's not just about financial gain. We want to solve problems, and we want to make this world, this space, better than we left it. That's our real goal here.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Thank
Here
you.
we go.
Take care.